Hello everybody and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me all sorts of Disney questions, whether it's about the parks or the movies, and I try to answer them to the best of my ability. And as always, while we answer some questions today, I'm going to be walking around mcmagic.us. It is a one-to-one scale recreation of Walt Disney World in the game of Minecraft. We've got a lot of great questions today. No face cam today. I apologize. It's allergy season. I really do not look very pretty today. But without further ado, let's just dive right in. Anyway, our first question is a big topic that has been asked multiple times, and it's about some recent news. So Loot Skywalker, which is a great username, by the way, asks, "Hey Rob, I was wondering with the recent announcement of Disney Infinity 3.0 and it being all about Star Wars, I wanted to hear what you think about it. I think it looks great because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but do you think they're pushing these games out too fast, or do you think they're doing the right thing?" On top of that, I also have, where is it? Yes, Devin on Minecraft, who says, "Please talk about Disney Infinity 3.0 ASAP, hashtag Star Wars." So, Disney Infinity 3.0 has been announced. The trailer came out about a week prior to that. Some screenshots or some photos of the starter kit leaked out. And I'm really have mixed feelings about this. I love Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm enjoying Disney Infinity. I think it's a great game and it's a great platform and I'm having fun with it. But I do think that this is a major misstep by Disney. And I think that while I'm not going to be the kind of person who's like, oh, this is going to fail horribly. I don't think it is. It's Star Wars and it's Disney. It's going to sell like crazy. But I think what Disney is doing is ultimately, without realizing it, or maybe they do realize it, they're setting themselves up for long-term failure. And the reason for that is, we don't need these yearly iterations of this. This is supposed to be a platform. You know, the whole idea is you're collecting these figurines, you're collecting these play sets. So the idea that I have to shell out, or anybody who wants to play has to shell out $75 or more for a new starter set every year is ridiculous. Now, some people might say, well, you know, you don't need the starter set. You get the play set separately, you could get the game disc separately, but the fact is, with these previous versions, they don't come out right away. So yeah, if I want to wait another couple of months, I could wait for them to come out separately, but the fact is that, one, I have to wait a couple of months, and then two, when you combine the prices of those, it really ends up being like a $5, $10, $15 difference. So it's not a huge difference. And it's just mind-boggling to me because, you know, the whole premise of this platform from a business perspective is you want to get people hooked. You want them collecting the figurines. You want them collecting the play sets. You want them collecting. Collecting is a great way to build a very rich, financially and long-term platform. And essentially, by making these 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 versions, you're adding this $75 paywall in between each version that just gives parents and, I guess, adults and anybody really an opportunity to think about it and go, well, do I really want to collect these that bad? Maybe not. You know, the starter set that we're going to see for Star Wars comes with a Clone Wars starter set, and it comes with 2 figurines. Now, one, this sort of irks me a little bit because we've been seeing progressive downgrades. Disney Infinity 1.0 came with 3 figures and 3 play sets. Disney Infinity 2.0 came with 3 figures and 1 play set. But the argument was this 1 play set was going to be as big as all 3 of the last ones. Although I feel like the gameplay is shallow enough that that's not a good enough justification, but whatever. Now 3.0 is coming out. We get 2 figurines in a playset. Like, what's next? Is Disney Infinity 4.0 going to be 1 figure in a playset? Half a playset? Maybe some DLC? Like, how much are they going to keep cutting it down? And then on top of that, Clone Wars, I just feel like Star Wars is such a rich property. You have the original trilogy. You've got the prequel trilogy, I guess. You've got Episode 7 coming out. Like, they could have just waited a couple of months and put out an Episode 7 kit. But they go with Clone Wars, and I think part of that is they just want to appeal to a younger audience who might have grown up with Clone Wars as opposed to the original films. But for someone my age, like, this all puts it on, you know, if you had told me 6 months ago Disney Infinity Star Wars kit, I would have said yes, hands down, no questions asked. Now, the idea of paying, you know, $75 for another power pad I don't need, 2 Clone Wars figurines I don't want, and a play set that isn't really as interesting to me, you know, makes me think maybe I'm not going to get Disney Infinity 3.0. And that's exactly the sort of thing I'm afraid of. All you have to do to see where Disney Infinity might be headed with these decisions is to look to Guitar Hero and Rock Band. They put out so many iterations of Guitar Hero and Rock Band year after year. With Guitar Hero, it was like within the years, and with just more additional plastic guitars that nobody needed or wanted, that it essentially just killed the genre completely. And now we're seeing it trying to reboot itself years later. So I hope that doesn't happen with Disney Infinity. If we're up to me, if I were Bob Iger or whoever has final say in this, you know, all of these upgrades from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 would have been free patches that come out every year, the way an MMO will give you free patches every so often, and then just focus on putting out new play sets every quarter. One play set every quarter, a couple of figurines every quarter. Keep people building and collecting. But by compartmentalizing it like this, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, you know, I could just collect a couple of figures, say, hey, I've got all of 2.0, and now I can just stop. I don't really need to start with 3.0, whereas you have one unified platform that spans multiple years and multiple versions of the software. You know, maybe I'm super into it, and I just want to keep collecting. So, I don't know. I'm really not pleased with the direction they're taking it in, but I guess we'll see how it all shakes out. It's not up to me, ultimately, right? Next question comes from Adam Road, who asks, says, I had the chance to see the Avengers, and they made a couple of pokes at Pinocchio. Do you see this in other movies, and will Disney continue to do this with other products from their subsidiaries? So yeah, Age of Ultron, there's a lot of references to Pinocchio in it. There's a few in the movie, but mostly it's the marketing and the use of Got No Strings, the Pinocchio song, which is like a good metaphor for, I guess, Ultron, who's sort of freed and able to, you know, go on his path of destruction. I don't want to spoil the movie or anything like that. I don't think this was a case where it was like Disney made a conscious decision. This wasn't like a synergy thing. They're not like, let's get them to name drop Pinocchio songs so that Pinocchio sales go up. I think really what it was Joss Whedon saw that as a great metaphor, and I think he probably would have used it in the film itself, but just by the luck that Disney owns Marvel and they have those rights easily, they were able to use the song. Even then, I think, you know, there are certain legal loopholes when it comes to covers, right? Because they don't use the original song. They use sort of like this creepy remake. So I don't think it really has much to do with the fact that Disney owns them. And I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of that. Eisner was huge into synergy, and I think maybe through him you would have seen a lot of that. But I don't know as much with Bob Iger, although it's always fun to spot. Our next question comes from Bryce Bokish, who says, do you believe pins sold in the park and in downtown Disney are overrated, or do you believe they are really great merchandise to buy and to have and to sell? So whenever it comes to these sort of questions, I always I don't like the idea of asking if something's overrated. Something is rated what it's rated. You know, people go, oh, is Frozen overrated, or Disney pins overrated, Star Wars overrated. Like, no, if the public's like wildly enthusiastic about it, then it's rated at what it should be. Really, to ask if something's overrated is really just asking, do I like something as much as the general public? When it comes to pin trading, probably not as much. It's a little expensive for my tastes, and I'm not a big collector type, so I don't really need to have it all. That said, if I were to get into pin trading, I think it would be less as I want a complete collection and more of like, I just want to grab a couple of pins that I think look cool. I think the big thing is like, what do you do with them once you have them? I know some people will have like really nice displays and they'll hang them up, and that's cool and everything. But for me, I don't really have a place to put pins. They would just sit in a drawer somewhere, or they'd be like sitting on a lanyard hanging on the wall. And that essentially then makes it just like art for my apartment, which is really expensive art. I think the other thing too is I just don't live in Florida, so I don't visit a lot. So the idea of getting into a hobby where I'm only going to take part in it every couple of years seems a little weird. But I don't think it's overrated. I think if people love to do that and they love, you know, the bringing all their lanyards to trade, then that's great. They should continue to enjoy that. Our next question comes from This Is My Username, who says, have you ever heard of the Disney 4-Park Challenge? If so, will you ever attempt it? Or would you consider it? So the Disney 4-Park Challenge, if you've never heard of it, it's very simple. Go to every Disney theme park in one day. Now, that sounds crazy to me. There crazier has happened. I remember reading a couple of years ago, I think back in 2012, a father and son who did a 6-park challenge, which means they went to all 4 Disney parks, got a snack, rode one ride exclusive to that park, then flew to California and did the same thing with California Adventure and Disneyland all within the same day. They did 6 parks in a day. That's crazy to me. I would never do it. I think it's really neat. I think it's cool that people try it. But, Disney for me is a vacation. And vacation should be as stress-free as possible. And that's hard to do already with Disney because it's such a complex and busy place to have a vacation. So to add on to that, the stress of trying to get to all 4 parks in the day, that just seems like too much work for relaxation. So I'd never do it, but I think it's cool that people do. Our next question comes from Bfish Alex Imagineering, who says, I have a few more questions for the Q&A. 1, when were park maps first introduced into the Disney World Disneyland park experience? And 2, how do you think the company would differ from today if Frank Wells was not chosen to co-own the Disney company with Eisner? So to answer your first question, I guess in some form or another, you could say before Disney even opened. In Disneyland, prior to the opening in 1955, a guidebook came out called The Story of Disneyland, and part of it included maps through the parks. You got to remember, Walt, he was really promoting Disneyland a lot before the park even opens. He wanted people to know what it was like and want to go there, and that's what he sort of did with his television show. And you had this guidebook, and so I guess you could say maps were there from before day one. As for your second question, how would it differ if Frank Wells was not chosen? That's a really complicated question because you have to understand the context from which they kind of stepped into the company. Eisner did a lot of great things at Paramount before he was at Disney, and he did a lot of great things at ABC, but he still wasn't proven enough to be a standalone chief executive officer. And so he wasn't immediately voted in by the board over at Disney. And so it was partially Frank Wells being there as sort of a second as president that was able to get him voted in. So you could almost make the argument that if Frank Wells wasn't chosen to be president, Eisner might not have been able to be CEO, or there would have been another second. One way or another, there would have been somebody. I think it is interesting because Frank Wells was very different from your typical, I think, corporate executive in that time in America. A lot of them were very aspirational. They had big plans. They wanted to get to the top, and he really didn't want to do that. He went into his job at Disney with a plan of how long he was going to be there before he left because he wanted to go climbing mountains. He's a big mountain climber at the time. So, he was really okay with just taking second seat to Michael Eisner. And later on, after he passed, you'd see that there'd be a lot of problems with Michael Ovitz, who then tried to step in kind of as president, and it really didn't go well. And that's a whole topic for Disney, did you know? But the idea is when you have 2 executives, each of them wanting to be the boss, you're going to get clashing. But I would say, yeah, if he wasn't picked, I don't think we might have seen Eisner. We might have seen somebody else. Our next question comes from Carly Page, who asks, if you were to pick one ride or area in the park to completely get rid of, what would it be and why? Thanks and have a magical day. I knew there was a question I told myself to think about before I started recording that I didn't. So now I'm on the spot. I think I would probably... That's a tough one. I don't want to get anything out of Hollywood Studios or the Magic Kingdom or Epcot, really. So really, I think it'd be the Animal Kingdom. I would get rid of Dinoland USA and put a new version of Dinoland USA. I mean, I've talked about it multiple times. I think the Dinoland USA that's there right now is very hastily thrown together. It doesn't have a really unified theme, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's cool, and I love Dinosaur, but I think it could do, for a complete overhaul. So that's what I would do. That's my question for you guys this week, by the way. I'm stealing Carly's question. What part of the parks, any of the parks in Disney and all of the world, would you remove and why? Next question comes from Jim is Awesome, who asks, why do you think Disney doesn't do more light horror, such as Nightmare Before Christmas, Frankenweenie? I don't mean straight up horror like Sweeney Todd or Jason, but lighthearted fun, small jump scarish types things. Why don't you think they do this? Thanks and have an awesome-tacular day. I think the answer to that, Jim, would be more of a boring business answer and more about the Hollywood, sort of ecosystem. And that is, I think horror, light or heavy, is a very niche genre, and it is a genre that doesn't make as much money because it's sort of compartmentalized to Halloween. You know, you rarely see a horror movie come out in like May, right? That just doesn't happen very often. And it's probably not going to sell as well year round because people get in the mood for horror in October, or maybe a little bit in a spillover in November and September. And I think that's ultimately that. I think it's just, you know, they look at horror and they decide that it's not going to be as great business wise. I assume they want to do it eventually sometimes. Like, look at one of the examples, The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's just so holiday based that they're blocking off so much of the year to sort of promote it and use it to their benefit. And I think that's ultimately why. I think that's why you see a lot of low budget and indie horror, because it is the sort of genre that isn't going to be picked for its financial stability. It's going to be picked because the people making it love it. And when you get to a company the size of Disney, a lot of those projects aren't picked just purely on the heart of it. Our next question comes from Daryl Zabulon, who asks, will you be continuing your podcast, Rob? So what Daryl's talking about is, I think like over a year ago, I decided to start the Rob Plays That Game Disney podcast. And all it really was me taking my Disney videos from this channel and taking the audio and sort of making an hour-long podcast for it. Because I noticed a lot of people mention that they like listening to like these videos because maybe they don't need to watch the MC Magic part or, you know, whatever the visual is. And so I thought I'd accommodate them by creating a podcast. What ended up happening was it ended up being a lot more work than I expected. I really underestimated how much work goes into putting a podcast together, even when all I'm doing is ripping the audio from my own videos and putting them together. And so I started falling behind on other things in work, and ultimately it was just one too many balls to juggle at the same time. And so something had to go, and I figured the podcast was only like a couple of episodes in. I would love to revisit it at some point when I can free up more time and have time to treat it right. You know, I don't want to just like rip the audio, slap it all together really like, you know, cluttered like, and throw it out on the internet. I want to make sure that if I do it, I take the time to do it the right way. And that is something I would like to do eventually. I'm also hoping that maybe it's less necessary. You know, maybe YouTube will get to the point where their app will allow you to just listen to videos while it's turned off, so it could almost act like a podcast. I don't know. One day in the future, but currently it's not in the plans. And then our final question this week is from Susan Bismack, who asks, do you think something will ever go into the health pavilion at Epcot? Well, Susan, I think it is a complete 50-50 split as to whether there will be something or not. I know a lot of people might think that because the building's still there, they might have plans for it in the future, but you have to remember that in the real world, as compared to something like Minecraft, destroying a building could be more expensive than just letting it sit there. And so I think without any official word from Disney, it's really hard to tell what they might want to do. It could continue to be storage. It could just be focused on private events, or they could refurb it when they finally have the money and put stuff in there. I'm hoping they put stuff in there. I'd love to see stuff, but as far as I could tell, there's no hint that that's going to happen or that they're going to tear it down. So I think for now, it's just sort of stuck in limbo, which is unfortunate because I think the topic of the future and technology and health is such a great one that is more relevant now than it ever has been. And so I think that's the perfect home to have some attractions that really push that point home, because I think that would be really fantastic. But there's a whole revisiting video all about that because I have very strong thoughts on it. Anyway, I would like to thank you all for your questions. This has been fantastic. If you would like to leave a question, you could do so by leaving it in the comments below, or you can send it to me on Twitter. I'm at Rob Plays, or you can even send it to me in snail mail because I have a P.O. box, and all you have to do there is mail it to Rob Plays That Game, P.O. Box 864079, Queens, New York 11386. I can't wait for the next batch of questions. And if you're new to this series and you want to see more Q&As and Disney history and ride histories and fun stuff like that, feel free to subscribe. This channel is now 100% Disney related. Whatever you do this week, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you all next time for the next episode of the Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.